The desperate plathe crystal spires of Zephyros gleamed under twin suns, their ethereal beauty masking the terror that gripped the planet's inhabitants. In the Grand Assembly Hall, representatives from across the Zephrian Commonwealth gathered in an emergency session that would determine the fate of their entire species. Ambassador Lyra stood at the center of the crystalline chamber, her translucent blue skin rippling with patterns of distress. The Zephrians were beings of pure thought and emotion, their bodies reflecting their inner states like living mood rings. Today, every delegate pulsed with the deep purple of fear. "Honored representatives," Lyra began, her voice carrying the musical tones characteristic of her people. "The Shadow Maw Collective has consumed 17 of our outer colonies. At their current rate of advance, they will reach our core worlds within 3 standard cycles." The assembly erupted in harmonious wails of despair. The Zephrians had always been peaceful, their entire civilization built around art, philosophy, and the pursuit of higher consciousness. They had never known war, never needed weapons, never conceived that their very existence could be threatened by beings who viewed them as nothing more than food. Elder Transcendence Kale, the oldest and wisest of their kind, raised his gossamer hand for silence. His ancient form glowed with silver light, a sign of his centuries of accumulated wisdom. "Tell us again what these Shadow Maw want from us," he requested, though they all knew the horrible answer. "They want nothing from us," Lyra replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "They want us. Our life essence, our consciousness, our very souls. They are ancient beings who feed on sentient thought itself. To them, we are nothing more than cattle." The assembly's crystalline walls resonated with the collective anguish of the gathered representatives. The Shadow Maw Collective was a nightmare. From the galaxy's dark past, a species so old and terrible that most civilizations believe them to be myth. They appeared every few millennia, consuming entire species before vanishing back into the void between galaxies. "What word from the Galactic Defense Initiative?" asked Counselor Vex, his form pulsing with desperate hope. Lyra's color shifted to deep gray, the shade of bitter disappointment. "Admiral Korvac of the Andromedan Fleet sent his regrets. He claims the Shadow Maw are beyond military solution, that we should consider evacuation to preserve what we can of our culture." "Evacuation?" Kale's voice cracked with disbelief. "Where? Would we go?" "The Shadow Maw don't just hunt us in space. They follow our psychic emanations across the galaxy. There is no hiding from them." Representative Zara from the mining world stepped forward. "The Hegemony Council offered to take refugees, but only a few thousand. They said housing an entire species would be economically unfeasible." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Zephrians numbered in the billions across dozens of worlds. A few thousand survivors would not preserve their civilization, merely delay its complete extinction. "There must be someone," pleaded Counselor Theta. "Some species strong enough to stand against the Shadow Maw. What about the Korthic Empire? Their warriors are legendary." Lyra's form shifted to the dark blue of bad news. "The Korthic remember. The last time the Shadow Maw emerged, 3,000 years ago. They lost 12 battle fleets trying to fight them conventionally. Even the mighty Korthic learned to hide when the Shadow Maw hunt." Elder Kale moved to the central podium, his ancient wisdom suddenly seeming inadequate against such overwhelming darkness. "In all our studies of galactic history, in all our diplomatic records, is there no species capable of resisting these creatures?" For long moments, only the soft harmonics of Zephrian breathing filled the chamber. Then Lyra's form began to shift to an unusual pattern, streaks of gold mixing with her natural blue, the color of desperate hope tinged with uncertainty. "There is one possibility," she said slowly. "The Terran Federation." The name meant nothing to most of the assembly. Murmurs of confusion rippled through the chamber as representatives tried to recall any diplomatic contact with this species. "I have never heard of these Terrans," admitted Counselor Vex. "Are they new to the galactic community?" "Very new," Lyra confirmed. "They made first contact only 15 standard cycles ago. They're from a system in the outer spiral arm, a world they call Earth. The Galactic Survey Corps classified their planet as ... unusual." "Unusual how?" Elder Kale inquired. Lyra accessed her diplomatic files, projecting the official survey report into the chamber's holographic display. Class Omega Deathworld, the highest danger classification in the galactic database. The assembly stared at the rotating image of Earth, a blue and green sphere that looked deceptively peaceful. The data streams told a different story. Gravity 1.7 times galactic standard, atmospheric pressure that would crush most spacefaring species, deadly radiation from a single massive star, and weather systems capable of leveling cities. "The survey notes are disturbing," Lyra continued. "The planet experiences regular mass extinction events, volcanic eruptions that can be seen from orbit, storms that generate more energy than our entire planetary power grid, seismic activity that reshapes continents and the life forms." She paused, her colors shifting to patterns of disbelief. "The life forms compete so intensely for survival that they've developed what the survey team called active predation strategies. Everything on this world has evolved to kill or avoid being killed." Representative Zara leaned forward. "And the Terrans survived on such a world?" "More than survived," Lyra said, her voice filled with growing amazement as she read deeper into the files. "They dominated it. They climbed the top of the food chain on a planet where everything else was trying to kill them. They developed tool use not for art or philosophy, but for hunting and warfare. The implications hung heavy in the chamber. Most galactic species had evolved on peaceful worlds, developing spaceflight through curiosity and cooperation. The Terrans had apparently forged their technology in the fires of constant struggle. "Have we had any diplomatic contact with them?" asked Elder Kale. "Limited," Lyra admitted. "They've established trade relations with a few border worlds, but they keep to themselves mostly. There are rumors that they're developing military technologies, but nothing concrete." Counselor Vex pulsed with skeptical orange. "Even if these Terrans are fierce warriors, what makes you think they would help us?" "We have nothing they need." "Because," Lyra said, her patterns shifting to the bright gold of revelation, "according to their first contact protocols, they have something they call the non-aggression principle. They won't attack other species without provocation, but they also can't tolerate genocide." The chamber buzzed with cautious hope. If the Terrans truly oppose genocide, they might be willing to help against the Shadowmaw. "There's something else," Lyra continued. "The Terran delegation mentioned that their military doctrine is based on something they call pack hunting. They apparently developed warfare strategies based on cooperative predation." Elder Kale's ancient eyes widened. "Pack hunting, like the apex predators of old myths." "I propose we send an immediate diplomatic mission to Earth," Lyra declared. "We have nothing left to lose." The vote was unanimous. Within hours, Lyra was aboard the fastest ship in the Zephrian fleet, racing toward a world that most of the galaxy feared to visit. Behind her, the Shadowmaw continued their inexorable advance, consuming worlds and civilizations with ancient hunger, the hyperspace. Journey to Earth took 3 days. During that time, Lyra studied everything the galactic database contained about humans. The files were sparse, but disturbing. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters, capable of tracking prey across vast distances until exhaustion claimed their victims. They had developed complex social hierarchies based on cooperation in warfare. Most unsettling of all, they had apparently spent most of their species' history fighting wars against each other. constantly refining their ability to kill Dot when Lyra's ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. She was immediately challenged by a Terran patrol vessel. The human ship was sleek and predatory, bristling with weapons that served no apparent purpose other than destruction. Unknown vessel, this is Commander Jackson of the Terran Defense Coalition. State your business in human space. Lyra activated the universal translator and opened a diplomatic channel. I am Ambassador Lyra of the Zephrian Commonwealth. I come seeking an audience with your leadership on a matter of galactic importance. There was a pause. Then, Ambassador, you're cleared for approach to Earth Orbital Station. Follow the nav beacon and maintain minimum speed. Be advised that our defense grid is tracking you. As Lyra's ship approached Earth, she could see why. It was classified as a death world. Storm systems large enough to swallow moons raged across the surface. The single massive star bombarded the planet with radiation that would sterilize most worlds. Yet somehow, humans had thrived here. The orbital station was a massive construction, clearly built for both commerce and warfare. Weapon emplacements covered every surface, and sleek fighter craft patrolled in formations that suggested military precision. Admiral Sarah Shun met Lyra at the docking bay. The human woman was tall and lean, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. She moved with the fluid grace of a predator, and Lyra could sense the barely contained power in her presence. Ambassador, Shin said, offering a formal bow. Welcome to Earth. I understand you have urgent business with our government. Lyra's color shifted to the deep blue of desperate supplication. Admiral, my people face extinction. An ancient evil has awakened, and we need help. Chun's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes sharpened. Tell me everything. In the station's diplomatic suite, Lyra explained the Shadowmaw threat, while Chun listened with the focused attention of a hunter studying prey. The human asked precise questions about Shadowmaw capabilities, their numbers, their feeding patterns, and their tactical methods. You said other species have refused to help, Chun observed when Lyra finished her explanation. They claim the Shadowmaw are unstoppable, Lyra replied, her colors dim with despair. That the only wise course is to hide and hope they pass by. Chun stood and walked to the viewing window, gazing out at Earth's turbulent surface. Ambassador, there's something you should understand about humans. We evolved on a world where hiding meant death. We learned that when something threatens your family, your tribe, your species, you don't run, you fight. She turned back to Lyra, and the Zephrian gasped at what she saw in the human's eyes. It wasn't just determination or courage, it was the focused intensity of an apex predator that had identified its prey. Admiral, Lyra whispered, are you saying you'll help us? Chun smiled, and it was not a reassuring expression. Ambassador, you came to the right species. Humans have been dealing with monsters our entire evolutionary history. It's time the galaxy learned what that really means. Within hours, Earth's communication networks blazed with activity. Military bases across. Human space received priority orders. The Terran Defense Coalition was mobilizing not just for war, but for a very specific kind of war, one that would teach an ancient evil what it meant to hunt the hunters. Asterisk, the hunt begins the Shadowmaw dreadnought. Eternal hunger drifted through the void between the Zephrian colony of Haven Prime and its sister world of Crystal Falls. The massive bioship, grown rather than built, pulsed with malevolent life as it fed on the psychic emanations of the fleeing refugee ships below. Ancient, Captain Morghast felt satisfaction ripple through his consciousness. As he directed the harvest, the Zephrians were particularly nourishing their crystalline minds, provided a clarity of thought essence that his kind had not tasted in millennia. His feeding tentacles twitched with anticipation as more refugee vessels fell within range of his psychic nets. The prey species grows more desperate, observed his lieutenant, Vorthek, a younger Shadowmaw whose hunger had not yet been tempered by eons of experience. They broadcast pleas for aid across multiple frequencies. Morghast's massive form shifted with amusement. In his 3,000 years of existence, he had consumed 47 species. Each had called for help in their final moments. None had ever received it. "Let them signal," he growled, his voice a subsonic rumble that resonated through the ships. Living walls. Fear makes the mind essence sweeter. Soon we will begin the final harvest of their core worlds. The Shadowmaw had perfected genocide over millions of years. They appeared suddenly, struck without warning, and consumed entire civilizations, before any meaningful resistance could form. They were patient, methodical, and utterly without mercy. But today, something unprecedented happened. "Captain," Vorthek's mental emanations carried confusion. "I detect massive hyperspace distortions approaching from the galactic rim. Multiple contacts moving at extreme velocity." Morghast extended his consciousness toward the disturbance. What he sensed defied his ancient understanding. Dozens of vessels, each one burning with aggressive intent, racing toward their position with single-minded purpose. "The prey have found allies," he mused. "HOW amusing. Signal the fleet to prepare for combat. We shall consume these newcomers as well." The Shadowmaw battle doctrine was simple. Overwhelm with superior numbers and psychic terror, then harvest the survivors. They had used the same tactics for millennia because they had never encountered a species capable of resisting them. The first human ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system like wolves emerging from a dark forest. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the Terran dreadnought Apex Predator, studying the tactical displays with professional interest. "Contact analysis," she ordered. Commander Williams, her tactical officer, consulted his screens. 67 Shadowmaw vessels detected, Admiral. Largest is approximately 12 kilometers long, bioorganic construction. They're arranged in a feeding formation around the refugee ships. Sean nodded. The human fleet had used the 3-day journey from Earth to study every available record of Shadowmaw tactics. Unlike previous species that had encountered these ancient predators, humans had approached the problem as hunters studying dangerous game. "Shadowmaw psychology profile, Dr. Martinez." The fleet's xenobiologist stepped forward. "They're apex predators, Admiral, but they've never encountered prey that fights back effectively. Their entire tactical doctrine assumes psychological dominance through terror. They expect their enemies to panic and scatter." "Recommended approach?" Dr. Martinez smiled grimly. "Shock and awe, Admiral. Hit them with something they've never seen before." Chon activated the fleet communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Chun. You know the mission. These creatures have spent millions of years hunting intelligent species for food. Today, they learn what it means to be hunted by humanity." The human fleet spread out in a formation that would have confused most galactic military experts. Instead of the traditional battle lines favored by civilized species, the Terran ships moved like a pack of wolves surrounding their prey. Captain Morghast watched the approaching fleet with growing unease. These newcomers moved differently than any species he had encountered. There was no hesitation, no attempt at communication or negotiation. They approached with the focused intent of natural predators. "Captain," Vorthek reported, "the unknown vessels are not responding to our psychic dominance projections. They appear to be immune to fear." Morghast's feeding tentacles writhed with confusion. Every sentient species experienced fear when confronted with Shadowmaw presence. It was a universal constant, coded into consciousness itself. "Impossible," he growled. "Intensify the fear projections." break their minds before they can organize resistance. The Shadowmaw fleet unleashed waves of psychic terror that had shattered the sanity of countless civilizations. The dark energy washed over the human ships like a tsunami of nightmare. On the bridge of the apex predator, Chun felt the psychic assault as a cold whisper in the back of her mind. Around her, the bridge crew continued their preparations with professional calm. "Admiral," reported the communications officer, "we're receiving some kind of psychic broadcast from the enemy fleet. It appears to be designed to induce panic and despair." Chun smiled coldly. "Any effect on crew performance?" "None detected, Admiral. Recommend we begin the attack." The truth was that humans had been living with their own fears for their entire evolutionary history. A species that had survived ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, and countless predators had developed minds naturally resistant to artificial terror. What would shatter another species' sanity was merely background noise to a human consciousness. Asterisk. "All ships," Chun ordered, "execute attack pattern Omega. Show them what happens when prey evolves into apex predators." The human fleet struck like a coordinated pack. The Terran ships didn't engage in the traditional single-file battle lines that the Shadowmaw expected. Instead, they attacked from multiple vectors simultaneously, using tactics developed from millions of years of pack hunting. The lead elements of the human fleet drew the Shadowmaw attention while flanking forces moved to cut off escape routes. Electronic warfare ships jammed the bioorganic communication networks that connected the enemy vessels. Heavy assault ships targeted what humans had identified as feeding organs, crippling the Shadowmaw ability to harvest psychic energy. Captain Morghast found himself in a battle unlike any in his ancient memory. These newcomers fought with coordinated precision, each ship supporting the others in complex patterns that seemed almost choreographed. More disturbing, they showed no fear, no hesitation, no mercy. "They fight like us," Vorthik observed with growing panic, "like apex predators." The revelation hit Morghast like a physical blow. For millions of years, the Shadowmaw had been the only true predators in the galaxy. Every other species they encountered had been prey, evolved on peaceful worlds where cooperation was more valuable than competition. But these newcomers, they're hunters, he whispered in horrified understanding. The human attack was devastating in its efficiency. The Terran ships used weapons designed not for territorial conquest, but for the complete destruction of their enemies. Kinetic kill vehicles moving at relativistic speeds shattered Shadowmaw bioships. Quantum torpedo salvos targeted the creature's nervous systems. Plasma cannons cauterized feeding tentacles with surgical precision. But most terrifying of all was the humans' tactical philosophy. They didn't just try to defeat the Shadowmaw, they tried to eliminate them completely. Every damaged enemy ship was hunted down and destroyed. No quarter was asked or given. Admiral Chun watched the battle unfold with professional satisfaction. The Shadowmaw were dangerous predators, but they had made a crucial mistake. They had evolved in isolation, without meaningful competition. Humans had evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them. "Admiral," reported Commander Williams, "enemy flagship is attempting to withdraw." Chun's eyes glinted with predatory satisfaction. "All pursuit ships, this is Admiral Chun. No enemy vessel leaves this system. We're not just here to win a battle. We're here to send a message." The human fleet began the methodical destruction of the Shadowmaw force. Ship after ship fell to coordinated attacks that exploited every weakness in bioorganic construction. The ancient predators found themselves on the receiving end of their own medicine, hunted to extinction by creatures even more perfectly adapted for warfare. Captain Morghast's ship shuddered under repeated impacts. His crew was dying around him, consumed by weapons they couldn't comprehend deployed by minds they couldn't understand. "Signal the collective," he gasped to Vorthik. "Warn them. The prey have evolved." But it was too late. The human pursuit. Ships had already disabled his communication systems. As the apex predator closed for the kill, Morghast experienced something no Shadow Maw had felt in millions of years of dominance. He experienced fear. The battle ended 6 hours after it began. Where once the Shadow Maw fleet had fed on helpless refugees, now only debris fields and the gleaming hulls of human warships remained. Chun opened a communication channel to the surviving Zephrian vessels. "Ambassador Lyra, this is Admiral." "Chun, the immediate threat has been eliminated." Lyra's voice carried disbelief and wonder. "Admiral, you destroyed them all. Completely. In all our historical records, no species has ever successfully fought the Shadow Maw." Chun's response was matter of fact. "Ambassador, the Shadow Maw made a fundamental error in judgment. They assumed the galaxy would always be divided between predators and prey. They never considered that prey might evolve into something more dangerous than they were. As the human fleet began rescue operations for the Zephrian refugees, word of the battle spread across the galaxy. The ancient terror that had haunted civilizations for millions of years had been destroyed in a single engagement by a species most had never heard of. The Shadow Maw Collective, receiving the death screams of their advance fleet, began to reconsider their return to the galaxy. For the first time in their existence, they had encountered a species that hunted the hunter's dot in the depths of space. The surviving Shadow Maw ships turned away from the galaxy's spiral arms and fled back to the dark. Between stars, the galaxy's apex predators had learned a hard lesson. There was always something higher on the food chain. Humanity had announced their presence to the cosmos, not as diplomats or traders, but as the ultimate expression of evolutionary survival. The prey had evolved into something that made ancient nightmares flee in terror. The hunt was over. The hunters had won. Asterisk.